Hey everyone, welcome back to the Forge of Sagas. I've been playing a lot of Necromunda recently, but I was keeping my dice and tokens in the Ziploc bag and it's getting a little difficult to organize before a game. So I decided, wait a minute, I have a 3D printer. I'll just go ahead and make myself a box. So I posted this on Reddit, a bunch of people liked it and asked me how I made it. So without further ado, let's make a little Necromunda dice and token storage box. The first thing I had to do was measure the tokens and the dice to know how much space I would need to store them. As it turns out, both the tokens and the dice are 5/8 of an inch long. I decided to stack the tokens 10 high, which came out to a height of just under an inch. Once I had the measurements, I jumped into Microsoft 3D Builder and grabbed the only two shapes that we're going to need to make the structural foundation of this box: the square and the cylinder. I then sized up a cylinder to be a little bit larger than the size of the tokens. This will make it a little bit easier to slide them in and out, and it gives me a little bit of tolerance on my printer just in case there's some variance during the print. Next I grab this cube and I bring it onto the center. Now if I printed it like this, there'd be no real easy way to get the tokens in and out, so I'm going to drag the cylinder forward a little bit to create a nice little gap. This will make it really easy for me to get the tokens in and out. Whenever I'm designing something for 3D printing, I always duplicate my components and keep them off to the side just in case I mess something up so I don't have to fiddle with the measurements again. Now, once we're ready, we go ahead and select the cylinder and subtract it from the cube. And there we go, we've got our single token slot. Now we're going to go ahead, give this a quick test print, and see if it works out. Here's the test piece, and as you can see, I got my stack of tokens here, and they slide in really nicely. There's a little bit of a gap at the top, but that's just in case I get more tokens in the future. I did have a couple of times where they would stand on their side like that, but they flop down pretty easily and you can get the tokens in and out really nicely. So, now that we've got our proof of concept, we can go on to designing the full box. Once I had organized all my tokens the way I wanted, I realized that I was going to need 16 slots, so I decided I would do 8 on each side of the box. So, I took my little test item and I duplicated it 7 more times and then slid them together. Now, normally you would merge them at this stage, but we're not going to do that just yet. As I'll talk about later, there's a little bit of a convenience factor in keeping them separate for now. I am, however, going to quickly paint them gray. That way we know that the active component is whatever component is in color. Next, we're going to go ahead and build the dice section of the box. Now, I've got this purple cube, which is about the size of 1 die, and as you can see, the blue cube is just a little bit bigger than it in all dimensions. That way I can easily fit 10 dice in this box without any issues. I decided to split my Necromunda dice up into 4 sets: the number dice, the ammo and scatter dice, the injury dice, and the vehicle dice. And so, in order to keep them separate and a little more organized in my box, I grabbed these 0.1 inch dividing lines and inserted them between each of my dice wells. This is just going to help them stay organized when the box is closed, and overall help me reach for the right dice during a game. Once I've got it all lined up, I can go ahead and delete the dividing lines, and then select all 4 of my dice well boxes and merge them together. Once they're merged, I'm going to go ahead and bring them to the center where I've been working with the previous components, and get everything lined up so that we can move on to the next step. Next, I added in this yellow cube, which is going to be the core of the box. I gave myself 1/4 of an inch on each side, just to have a little bit of wiggle room for where I want to place my magnets later. I've also brought back our purple dice cube because this is how we're going to find out exactly where we need to place our dice wells. I slid the purple cube up to the wall and then raised it up so that the dice was a little bit over halfway above the top of the yellow cube. This is going to make it really easy for me to grab the dice while I'm playing, but they'll still be embedded enough in the main body of the box so they won't rattle around too much. I like working at 0 because it's easy to reset stuff if I ever have to pull it out to make sure that everything is level. Now I can put the dice wells back in the center, and I know that once I end up subtracting them later, that my dice will fit. Next, we're going to go ahead and add the magnets that are going to hold on the lid. In this case, 5mm sphere magnets. I really like working with them as they're really easy to embed within an FDM printed project, so I'm going to go ahead and grab this cylinder, which is 6mm in every direction, and I'm going to go ahead and drag it into place, centered on the last token holder. Now, the reason I didn't merge together all the token holders before is that when I'm in Microsoft 3D Builder, the pieces I have will snap together along the center line, so it's really easy for me to find that center line if I don't merge that whole block together. just a little bit of convenience. In order to make sure that the lid is very secure, I'm going to go ahead and add 3 magnets per side. We got the one that we placed here on the left. We're also going to go ahead and put one in the center, and then one centered in the right corner. Once I'm happy with where the magnets are, I'm going to go ahead and finally merge the 8 token holders, duplicate them, rotate them 180 degrees, and stick the duplicate on the other side of the box. Then I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing for the magnets. Another convenient thing about working at 0 when you're in Microsoft 3D Builder is that if you have to mirror something like we have with these 3 pieces, but we don't exactly know where they're supposed to be on the y-axis, we can always go in, select the old ones, copy the y value, and then change its sign, in this case from a negative to a positive. That way we know that our magnets on both sides are exactly symmetrical. Now that everything's in place, we can put the magnet holes at the right height on the z-axis. I've pulled mine out a little bit in the x just to make it easier to see, and I start by lining up the magnet holes with the top of the box. Normally I like to have about 3 layers of plastic between the magnet and the surface, and my printers are currently calibrated to a layer height of 0.2 millimeters, so I'm going to go ahead and drop the z-axis by 0.6 millimeters. That way I know that the top of the magnet hole will be 3 layers beneath the surface. Once that's done, I can change the x-axis back to 0. As you can see, they've kind of disappeared into the print, and then I can go ahead and subtract them. Now once we go into X-ray view and we look around, we can see that there are in fact 6 magnet holes buried inside the structure. Now we're going to go ahead and make the lid. I originally considered turning the lid into a dice box, but it ended up being just a little bit too big and bulky, and I didn't like the way it looked. So I decided for just a slimmer lid that would just keep the dice in and generally keep things organized. Here you can see that I'm grabbing all of the measurements from the bottom of the box and transferring that to the lid. That way I make sure the lid covers everything nicely and is the exact same size as the entire box. I also ended up switching back to inches here because that's my native measurement and it makes me feel more comfortable. Here I'm using my duplicate of the magnet holes that we used for the bottom of the box and using them to help me do the top. So now we're going to go ahead and bring those into the center, drag them off a little bit to the X, and then line them up with the bottom of the top of the box rather than the top of the bottom of the box. Again, I'm going to slide them in, that way I can gauge my height properly. And then instead of subtracting 0.6 millimeters, I'm going to go ahead and add 0.6 millimeters. That way again, there'll be 3 layers of plastic between the magnet and the bottom of the top of the box, giving me 6 layers of plastic in total between the 2 different magnets. The last thing I had to do was of course subtract the dice wells. I went ahead, dragged up the lid of the box, selected the dice wells, hit Ctrl Z to bring back down the lid, and then subtracted the dice wells. And now for the big reveal. We can go ahead and pull away the top, and there are the dice wells. Looking nice. Now I'm going to go ahead and merge together the 3 parts at the bottom of the box because I didn't do that earlier for some reason. And with that, we're done. This is the structural core of the box, and this is all I really needed to do to have effective storage. But if I was going to use this box, I needed it to look cool as well. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of decoration. There's a lot of cool STL files out there on the internet, and I came across this Necromunda logo which I thought would look really nice on the front and back of the box. So I just rotated it into place and then slapped it up against the side. I did consider just leaving it at the size that it was currently at and letting the height difference between the box and the banner be a little bit of a way to keep the lid in place, but at the end of the day I decided to shrink it down so that it would only be on the bottom of the box and also so that it would span the entire side of the box. Once I was happy with how it looked, I duplicated it, rotated it 180 degrees, and slapped it on the other end of the box as well. For the top of the box, I didn't like that it was flat, so I came in with the split function and angled it at a 45-degree angle so that I could clip off just the edges and give it a little bit of a slanted top on the sides. I just thought that would look kind of cool. Once I was happy with how the angle looked, I split the top of the box down the middle, keeping only the side with my 45-degree angle cut. I then duplicated the side that I had left, rotated it 180 degrees, moved it over so that I had the full size of the top of the box again, and merged the 2 halves back together. To add some additional detail, I grabbed this Necromunda Tactics cards box that I found on Thingiverse, and I sliced it so that I just got those top details with the industrial girders as well as Lord Helmwar's symbol. I then dropped the details into the center of the top of the box and played with the dimensions until it was a perfect fit. I also decided to grab the girders from the side of the card case and apply them to the slanted sides of my box lid. Again, I just thought it was something that would tie the whole look together. So, I came in, sliced the details exactly the same way that I did with the top of the box, and then I played with it for a while to make sure that I had exactly the right positioning and dimensions so that I would have a seamless fit between the details on the top of the box and these details on the slanted edges. Now, there was still this little bit of overhang where the girders on the side went past the edge of the box, and I didn't want that. So, I generated another cube, dragged it to the edge of the core of the box so that it would overlap the side of the girder that was overhanging, extended it to run the full length of the box, and then just subtracted it away. It's a pretty simple and clean way to remove details beyond a certain point if you've got an edge, much like we have here with the edge of this box. Once I had merged all of the pieces together, it was time to just do a quick check to make sure that everything was lining up. I always do this at the end of my projects just to see if maybe something is a little bit off here or there, maybe something didn't quite merge properly, whatever. Once I was happy with how everything turned out, I went ahead and saved it as an STL file, and it was ready for printing. Whenever I'm doing inserted magnets within a print, one of the most important things to make sure that I include when I'm printing is a pause at height. This feature is really useful for a variety of things, as it just allows you to stop the print at any point that you choose. Now, for me personally, I'm using this to stop the print so that I can put the magnets in and then have the printer seal them in. That way, there's no need for any glue. It's all very clean and very sturdy. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and find the height where the printer seals off the magnet holes. And that's the height where I'm going to stop it. So in this case, layer 132. It's the last layer where I can still see into the magnet holes. I'm going to go in, select post-processing, add script, pause at height, and then I'm going to change it from height to layer number, and I'm going to select the appropriate layer number. Again, in this case, 132. I also make sure to go and set where the print head is going to go to be as far back on my build plate as possible. That way I can get in and put the magnets in without the fear of disturbing the printer head or moving anything around. Another thing you really need to keep an eye on when you're doing these inbuilt magnet holes is your infill pattern. Here I have a 15% infill with a grid pattern, and as you can see, it really nicely supports where the magnet holes are going to be right there. However, not all infills are created equal, and I actually failed my first print of this because my infill pattern was not set up to support the way I was putting in the magnets. Here you can see the infill that I was using, which was Cross 3D. Now I really like using this on printing terrain because it allows me to save a whole lot of filament and it's still really sturdy, but if you zoom in and you look into this particular infill, you can see that there's really no support at this particular layer height for the magnet holes. This is what happened to me. I had 2 different magnet holes collapse, and therefore I had to start over again. So, again, if you're inserting these kind of built-in 5mm sphere magnet holes into your prints, make sure you're using an infill that will properly support them. And here we have the finished print. As you can see, it's a really nice way to organize all the different bits and pieces for Necromunda, and I have to say I'm really happy with how it turned out. I was really happy with how the lid came out, especially as while the magnetic force is pretty strong, it's also not that hard for me to get it off. So overall, really happy with how this turned out. Obviously, you can apply the same techniques that I used here to building boxes for Magic the Gathering, Dungeons & Dragons, or any other game that has a lot of dice and tokens that you want to keep organized. If you liked this video, give us a like and subscribe to the channel to keep up to date on all of our future content. If you have anything you'd like to see me try, drop me a comment and I'll see what I can do. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again the next time we ignite the Forge of Sagas.